a ir
So we will start. The participants, they are just joining us, and meanwhile, let's give them a little more time so that they can join us. I will stop sharing my screen. First of all, just a final question before we start. Victoria, would you like to test your PowerPoint to see if it is going well? Otherwise, we can see that later. Okay. Meanwhile, let's give some time so everybody join us. Our participants, very well. Very good. PowerPoint, okay. So let's start our webinar. I would like to tell you all that this webinar is being recorded in different languages. I will speak a little bit about this, but we start recording now. First of all, I would like to welcome you all with a good morning or a good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome you all to this webinar, Innovation Network and Value Added in Local Economies and the Bioeconomics in the American economy and sustainability in this project, SABio. I also would like to thank for your attendance and your time that you came here.
Es complicada en ambos lados del mundo. Así que paso a presentarme. Mi nombre es Melisa Deciancio, soy investigadora de la Universidad de Münster en Alemania y del CONICET en Argentina, y trabajo para el proyecto Transformation and Sustainability Governance of South American Bioeconomies. Este es un proyecto que está llevado adelante por las universidades de Münster. Aquí tenemos al coordinador que ya se presentará en su momento, Jorge Celare, y a Karen Siegel, perdón, al revés, la Universidad de Münster y la Universidad de Bonn. La Universidad de Münster tenemos a la coordinadora, Karen Siegel, aquí presente, y ahora en un ratito le voy a dar la palabra a ella, y de la Universidad de Bonn, Jorge Celare, que también nos acompaña. Además es financiado por el Ministerio Federal de Agricultura y Alimentos de Alemania. Y además quiero aprovechar este momento también para agradecer al equipo de investigación que también nos acompaña aquí, que nos ayudó en la realización de este seminario, y especialmente a Pablo McLean, mi colega de la Universidad de Bonn, que estará acompañándome en la moderación del evento. Bueno, en el marco del proyecto, lo que nos propusimos con este seminario virtual o webinar es convocar a expertos y expertas de la región para conversar sobre las posibilidades y desafíos que tienen los países de Sudamérica para el desarrollo de redes de innovación. Es por eso que hoy contamos con la presencia de estos 3 expositores que no tenemos dudas de que nos darán importantes insumos e ideas para pensar el presente y futuro de la bioeconomía en la región. Ahora les voy a contar. Isabel Marín lamentablemente no va a participar, se excusó por una cuestión de salud, así que por eso digo que vamos a ser 3 participantes, a diferencia de lo que figuraba en la agenda. Y ahí les quiero recordar que contamos con traducción simultánea y que pueden seleccionar abajo en su Zoom el canal de idioma que deseen, en inglés, portugués y español. Y bueno, les recuerdo nuevamente que el webinar va a ser grabado y estará disponible posteriormente en nuestro sitio web, que más tarde compartiremos. Ahora, y para no ocupar mucho más del tiempo, sabemos que es tirano y que además los Zooms se hacen largos a veces y tediosos, no lo voy a ocupar yo el tiempo. Quiero darle brevemente la palabra a los líderes del proyecto, en este caso a Karen Siegel, la coordinadora del proyecto en la Universidad de Münster, que van a hacer una breve introducción al mismo, y luego de eso vamos a pasar a las intervenciones de nuestro expositor y expositoras, y cerraremos con una ronda de preguntas y respuestas que pueden ir agregando ya en el chat abajo, donde dice Q&A en el Zoom. Creo que ya a esta altura todos conocemos el sistema de Zoom, estamos muy familiarizados, así que ahí abajo pueden ir dejando sus preguntas, consultas, comentarios, pueden ir presentándose si quieren, ya vimos algunos saludos y presentaciones, así que siéntanse libres de usar esa casilla. Nosotros vamos a ir recolectando las preguntas que vayan surgiendo para después transmitirlas, y los expositores también pueden ir leyéndolas. Bueno, nuevamente muchas gracias por estar con nosotros hoy, y le doy la palabra ahora sí a Karen.
Bueno, aquí estoy. ¿Pueden escucharme? ¿Funciona? Sí. Bueno, bienvenidas, bienvenidos también de mi parte. Bueno, como ya dijo Melisa, el proyecto SABio tiene dos grupos de investigación. Uno en economía ambiental y agrícola, en la Universidad de Bonn, que está dirigido por Georges Celare, y después mi grupo en ciencias políticas en la Universidad de Münster. Y quiero decir un poco más sobre el proyecto. Tenemos tres líneas de investigación y preguntas generales. Primero, ¿en qué condiciones puede la bioeconomía desarrollarse de manera sustentable? Después, ¿cuáles son los mecanismos de gobernanza más efectivos para la promoción y la regulación de las transformaciones en la bioeconomía? Y tercero, ¿cuáles son los efectos de las diferentes políticas y tecnologías asociadas a la bioeconomía sobre las dimensiones sociales y ambientales? Bueno, después cada grupo y también cada investigadora, cada investigador está desarrollando su propia agenda de investigación dentro de este marco global. Si quieren saber más, aquí tenemos el sitio web del proyecto. Y un último comentario: el punto de partida del proyecto es que la bioeconomía no es automáticamente sustentable, y entonces es fundamental investigar cómo se puede imaginar y desarrollar una bioeconomía sustentable que tenga en cuenta dimensiones ambientales y sociales y presta atención a diferentes perspectivas y puntos de vista. Y eso también incluye una inserción sostenible en la economía global, que es el tema de este seminario hoy. Y como Melisa ya dijo, tenemos un excelente panel de expertos, y entonces yo también quería agradecerles mucho por las presentaciones. También quería agradecer a Melisa por la dirección de la organización de este seminario, y a todo el equipo de SABio, y también las intérpretes que hacen el trabajo ahora. Muchas gracias por la participación y que disfruten de las discusiones.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Me sumo a todos los agradecimientos de Karen. Bueno, creo que estamos en condiciones de darle la palabra a nuestros expertos.
Now we can then turn the floor to our experts. They are going to make their presentations, not I. So let's start with Victoria Santos. Victoria, she comes from the ICS and from the SENAI Institute from Brazil. Victoria, you can share your presentation with us, please. Hello, Melisa. Thank you very much. Sorry, I am not with my headphones, nor with a microphone, and it is a pleasure to be here with you. I am Victoria, as Melisa said, and I was invited as a participant that belongs to an innovation network from the SENAI Institute of Innovation and Biosynthetics. This is what I'm going to talk about. Today, I am the coordinator of the industrial decarbonization for ICS. So I have been working for quite a while with bioeconomy here in Brazil, and I will do a very brief presentation to you about this red vision here in our current situation. And of course, I'm open for questions. I will make my presentation in Portuguese and not in Portuguese. I'm going to share my screen. Let me see if I can find my presentation. Very well. So you could ask questions if you like, and I'm going to share. Yes, it's perfect. Okay. So, first of all, good morning from Brazil, good afternoon. I was very happy to receive this invitation and with a topic I believe is very relevant for Brazil and Latin America, of course. We need actually to discuss and propose a new governance system so that we can guarantee a bioeconomy that brings development for the country and for the region. So I will start the presentation showing our vision of innovation networks in Brazil. First of all, I have to tell you about the size of Brazil. Brazil houses 20% of the planet's biodiversity. It is a country that is a continent by itself, extremely diverse. It is one of the main stakeholders, global stakeholders in the agribusiness. And this is a very important point because this participation in the agribusiness happens with the exports of commodities. And this is something that we question in the point of view of the development of the economy. And this is the territory. We have 6 biomes that live together in a very harmonious way. And each of these biomes, they have their own characteristics, their challenges, and also they bring their own opportunities. So when we think about Brazil, we have to think about this diversity, about these possibilities. In addition, because Brazil is a country which is very big with many biodiversities, an important player, it's also a very traditional player in terms of the use of the concept of biorefinery. This was a concept that was created with a more modern perspective, but the Brazilian agro industry can be understood as a biorefinery. And here we have agro industries that generate and obtain from one feedstock a series of different products, and that's the evolving throughout the time. Here I can show you a few examples, such of the biorefinery of sugarcane. In addition to the sugar, also produces ethanol, electricity, animal feed, fusel oil that can be used in cosmetics, also biogas, and currently hydrogen. We are trying to think about that using the feedstock of sugarcane. We have pulp and paper also. In addition to pulp and paper, produces also electricity and lignin, which is an input that comes from biomass with a series of advanced applications in the development of the sector. And also we have others such as orange. In addition to concentrated juice of the pulp wash, we also have the production of limonene and other essential oils. So these are 3 examples. If we think on the industry of the soybean and other industries here in Brazil, they also can be considered as biorefineries. But a biorefinery on a stage that needs more progress, but also ways to remunerate the network in a more sustainable way. In addition to this more traditional and historical vision in Brazil, we also have all the unexplored potential based on the exploration of the Brazilian biodiversity. You have some examples here. In the açaí chain there, 80% of the total processed açaí is waste. So, and this brings an enormous sanitary problem to the north of Raíz. For palm heart, also 70% is discarded. The same thing happens with cupuaçu, 70% discarded in each crop. So these are chains with a traditional development for the food area, but with a great unexplored potential, both in the point of views of the main products, but also in the residues that are generated and generate sanitary problems from some societies, some communities. And we have a need of looking at it more structurally.
Just like we have been seeing in these three chains that I've shown you in the northern part of Brazil, these opportunities are also present in other regions of the country. And now you can see a land map that shows that there are residues from the production of those biomasses that can be reutilized. Forestry residues, for instance, in the central part of the country have bagasse, eucalyptus, mamona. So we have many opportunities that can be multiplied in the nation. And from that, you can understand how important those chains are and how it is possible to have those producers being brought into the process, what kind of technologies we can use to explore any more economically viable and sustainable all those opportunities that we have. We have been bringing studies to date that study that. We have a study that says that bioeconomy can bring over $53 billion per year and bring it into the Brazilian GDP in the next time, creating, of course, a whole lot of new work positions in the realm of sugarcane and soybean, for instance. If we expand this to the chains of alternative proteins and other fiber applications, we could reach $400 billion per year in production, and that would bring a whole new impact to Brazil and help us to reduce climate change and enhancement of temperatures in Brazil. So we have to bring in new governance systems so that we have technology advancements and reach out to that vision that we have. Another very important figure is that we have a huge chemical biodiversity, and this could be even more enhanced if better new applications are used. Of course, there are already many innovation networks in Brazil that have been growing mature lately, but we still have many opportunities to reach out to. And here you can see the innovation ecosystem in Brazil. It is encompassed by the government, agencies, financing agencies, universities, startups, industries, and more recently, in the past 10 years, we have reached out to SENAI, which is the school of the Industrial Association, so that we can reach out to the market and establish a more tighter network with industry. There are many different stakeholders, and they have been acting differently lately. So what we have basically is the government acting in basic research. This is the government's traditional action. We have to think of how we can advance bioeconomy so as to create development, and the government is very important in this. We cannot think of only private investments in doing this. We have to still count on the government. We have in the TRLs, between the TRLs 3 and 6, so as to pilot our initiatives. We have application and validation demonstration being made by MBRAP unities. And of course, we have reached out already to the market and to industry. The SENAI Institute of Technology, for instance, has been devoted to certification. It is not really active in the part of development, but we have investors, corporate ventures also that have been investing at this stage and point of our system. Now, where are our innovation networks located in Brazil? It starts at the end of TRL2 and reaches out to the entry in the market. This is, so to speak, the death valley of technology, because this is the place where we really need investments so as to catalyze projects. And in the realm of bioeconomy, we have two main networks, MCTI Embrap, the first network innovation in bioeconomy, and also the SENAI School of the Industry Association. There are 28 units within the MCTI Embrap, over 350 already projects in R&D in bioeconomy, and almost over 400 million real in investments, and 78 intellectual property demands. So this networks has been catalyzing the potential that we have here in Brazil. The main goal is to unify all these units that we have to the industry, bring them together so that we can tackle themes that are important for the industry. And you can find this network in the TRLs 3 till 6. It was initiated by companies and industries and research places acting already in Brazil. Now we have the networks of SENAI Institutes of Innovation. So the network of institutes, of SENAI Institutes of Innovation, it was created in 2012 and brings together the Biosynthetics and Fiber Institutes in Rio de Janeiro, Green Chemistry in Rio, electrochemical innovations in the southern part of Brazil. So you can see it is all around Brazil with many different foci that are aligned to the idea of bioeconomy. This network of institutes bears within it its portfolio of innovation from the industry and seeks to support the industry. So this network works basically supporting technological advancement of the Brazilian industry, and this is completely aligned to the idea of a public-private partnership. Here we have a picture of one of the latest institutes that was created, 2016, of biosynthetics and fibers, 13 requests of patents, over 4 products already on the market. So this is the main objective of innovation networks in Brazil, to take technologies that are being produced in that territory into the competitiveness of the market, and to gather together other partners, establish partnerships nationally and internationally, so that we can build together an agenda for bioeconomy that goes beyond exports of commodities. And I would like to close my presentation by saying that although we have many advancements, we need to have a better look and a broader look into the country to understand what the vision of the country is, so that we can understand which technologies are crucial for Brazil, in which areas Brazil is competitive, where would be interesting that the government would invest in Brazil, where could we be protagonists here in Brazil, and where could there be a spillover effect into the industry, so that the industry can advance more, and not only punctually, but do that bringing new quality in work positions and bringing more of social environmental development in Brazil. And that's it. I would like to thank you all for your attention. Well, thank you very much, Victoria, for your very interesting presentation and everything that you brought to us about Brazil. You tackled many interesting aspects that we will be able to bring into the discussion later. I would like to animate all attendees to post questions in the question box. If you would like to do that, if you would like to do your questions orally, you can do that. You just have to signalize to us so that we can open up your microphones. Now, I'd like to give the floor to Isabel Bortagaray. She is with the Universidad de la República in Uruguay. Thank you very much to you and to all the staff for this invitation.
I'm going to share my screen with you. So can you see it? Yes, well, not in the presentation mode. So just may adjust it here just a minute, please. So very well. Thank you very much once again. It's a pleasure to me to be here doing a presentation about a progress of a series of research projects of which I participate. My presentation is about bioeconomies for a sustainable human development in the northeast of Uruguay, and what is the role of innovation and knowledge. This was a paper done with Maria Studer, my associate. The presentation will include a series of topics. First of all, as a starting point, for a reflection about bioeconomies. We will be using two projects. One is the North, Mid, South corridor, and the other one is a project on bioeconomy in the Northeast. And this is focused on the bioeconomy in the Northeast of the country. Later on, I will detail the context of the region, about which I'm going to say that is located in the northeast of Uruguay, the development of the region economically, the national productive grid, and then lessons learned with this project of the knowledge and also with the innovation in the public-private sector. As I mentioned before, we have two projects that I will detail here. One is in progress, and it's a big group, a big team of different disciplines. We are all professors, and to know if the bioeconomy is a strategy that can be used for human development for the northeast of Uruguay, and what are the concepts that have to be discussed for its implementation. There is a second project that was concluded and was financed by UNEP and wants to understand the acceleration of knowledge for the analysis under the perspective of sustainable scope. Both projects include different methodologies. On the bioeconomy project, which is in progress, we have a more quantitative approach, actually also with a qualitative approach with the different dynamics of production in the territory, and also the mapping of the stakeholders, focus groups, and deep dived interviews. In the corridor of knowledge project, we started with interviews for 55 companies and 27 organizations linked to the production of knowledge. Let's talk a little bit the context of the Uruguay's Northeast region. It is a very broad region with a low density of population that is in an economic arrears, especially in social indicators. It is a region in arrears with a development of production that is not in good standing. Although it's a dynamic region in terms of productive growth, it's very vulnerable with a process of migration and dynamics of borders. This is a border with Brazil, but at the same time, it includes a big economic dynamism with major disparities and heterogeneities in the territorial. Here we are building the second plant of pulp and paper from UPM, one of the largest investments in the country. There was a great increase in terms of research and development at a university level, and this is very much connected to the decentralization of the Universidad de la Republica, with the creation of interstate campi, and also with the development of knowledge between the Ministry of Livestock, Agriculture, and Fishery. In this development that I'm mentioning here, as you can see, there is a level of delay that is very important in social economical terms. Only to give you a broader context, in Uruguay, it's a country that depends very much on its natural resources, agriculture, the agro-industrial and agroforestry sector, which has grown considerably in the participation of the GDP. What have we learned? What lessons have we learned after this project corridor, which is a project that we have already finished? We have a network of knowledge, especially in the production of knowledge with accrued capacity, especially in what is linked to forestry. And this very deep network is increased by the supply of supports to research, just like the collaboration that are among institutes and also comes from abroad, considering the link that we have with Brazil because of the border specialization in forestry and offers for tourism, which was one of the areas where Corridor project has as a focus, the reforestation and tourism. We also find the localization of programs supported by the business communities with a good participation of mid and big-sized companies. We also see that in this research with these organizations, there is a big link with the companies in terms of technical assistance, research and development. The INEA, which is an Institute of Agriculture and Livestock Research, they have campuses in this region with a big connection with the reforestation companies. So the University of the Republic also includes a big connection here. There is a high support from private associations and other organizations of research and development with local governments. This perspective shows that all the teams receive or understand that there are a series of obstacles in the performance of these companies. We have communication problems and also the problems with research and development. Other obstacles also include difficulties of understandings and problems of time, and we also lack time where communication can be performed, and these processes can be facilitated, and lack of information about other organizations. And here we have companies with other companies and a better link with other companies. And also we have also activities of formation of research that has to be developed. And here we have to see that's very interesting because we cannot see the companies being able to cooperate much with one another. And we have also the need of some public support, especially in advisory for investments. And also we need the support of these organizations that are working in this territory. This is one of the factors of development that we are seeing in the region. And what can we learn about the project in terms of bioeconomy in the northeast of Uruguay, in what we are working? And that we have this first point. The first, what happens with a lot of strength is this concept of bioeconomies in plural and the need of bringing it into a context of a concept that is polysemic and very complex. It's also necessary to include it in the territorial dynamics, and we have to focus bioeconomics as an instrumental approach, which is very important for a sustainable human development. So this is directed for the economy in its environmental characteristics. And then we are trying to find then all these problems in the project. So bioeconomy helps us to think on the strategies of the different approaches, and bioeconomy by itself cannot be sustainable, taking into consideration that this provides a recognition to space for sustainability and different frictions. We can include, we understand this as an integral part in the development and in points that have to be solved and that need a better understanding and a better harmony. We also see that the project calls a lot for the stakeholders. We have a focus on sectorial dynamics that also include innovation, knowledge, and better collaboration of all the stakeholders. As one of the results that we are reaching, and based on the qualitative approach and based on our work with focus group. We had two focus group, one connected to the more economic and productive area, another to the social and environmental. Later on, we will be making these interviews. But on these ones, we were able to see the problem of sustainability, the economic part, and how to connect sustainability and bioeconomy. These frictions that I mentioned depends on the dimension and shows a difficulty to value the social dimension of sustainability and understand sustainability in the production and not only in the consumption. Different levels. And one, this integration of the different areas, and the other side, the productive versus consumption. And in general ways, we have to analyze and highlight sectorial perspectives. And the sustainability, when it appears, also appears as a partial approach linked to the different sectors that we mentioned before. In terms of reports, we have problems with a lack of sustainability, and these contribute with a lack, or this happens because of practices that cannot be sustainable, and because of lack of education, because also with a problem of the university background of the professionals, and in the measure of how this is outdated in terms of tackling on these kinds of problems. The second focus group, the social environmental one, also includes sustainability and mentions it as something that needs to be better structured. Then we have this question. How much the introduction of the prefix bio shows us that there is really a change in production and consumption. What remains in the ideas? How much do we include of transformation? How much is only marketing? Can you hear me well? I hope so. So we also have this other question about bioeconomy. How much is it a progress in the vital dimension of economy? There is a reference. The economy seems to be something difficult, but bioeconomy brings this notion of life to economy, thinking of it as another way of living and reaching another level of civilization coming with life. And also we have this topic, just like we have to place an adjective in economy linked to sustainability, we also have to include knowledge and innovation, especially in the context of Uruguay and other regions. We don't have productive sectors that demand too much knowledge. So how can we do to root this economy better in this in this purpose? How can we link bioeconomy and agroecology? There is a certain understanding that we still lack some knowledge about agroecology and the vision of the roles of the systems, scientists, and all these systems. Also, we have to see how far do we reach? How far does this change reach? As a first question, how much are we really talking about a deep transformation of the production and consumption ways? Are we having new policies? Do we have old names from the same concepts?
And there are many other questions that have to do with the challenges on the sustainable and also on the legal level. there is a need for inter-institutional meeting spaces, and we have to think of spaces that bring different stakeholders together. The challenge is how to generate those spaces. How far should they reach? What kind of objectives should they have? And there's a lack of information, for instance, data. This is something by itself. We have to understand a little bit better what kind of changes in biodiversity are happening, starting from production changes. And what kind of productive changes, what do they do in biodiversity? There is also the need to find knowledge spaces and co-innovation at the public-private level. There is the need for interinstitutional meeting places. It's important to involve the academia, the productive sector, and also civil society organizations. Above all, considering our theme, the theme of sustainability. Nowadays, we have a Wood Technologies Center in Tacuarembó. It's a public-private participation. It is in progress. And in a short period of time, we will have another innovation center in Paysandú. This is an opportunity to think what kind of characteristics should the center have. And what kind of public-private design should it have? And what kind of implementation of sectoral policies should be based on knowledge and innovation? So we understand here is the relevance of sectoral research funds with emphasis on sustainability. Those research funds seem to be an opportunity, a very interesting opportunity to strengthen knowledge in the interface of innovation in the realm of public-private partnerships. So I would like to leave us with some questions to further discussion. Considering bioeconomy for sustainable human development and based on knowledge and innovation, the question that comes to surface is how to make science, technology, and innovation to be constitutive of sectoral policies, bioeconomy of the environmental sector. We have strong challenges at the level of governance systems. Territorially, we have dense networks in terms of productive linkages. You don't see this as being kept able to reach out to other sectors. So what we have is really as I said, dense network territorially in terms of productive linkages, but limited presence of science, technology, and innovation in policy actions. What we see is that the university is rooted in knowledge, but we don't see national public policies having a own network reaching out to the territories. We have to discuss integral sustainability to see it in a complex way and to put it in the core of all efforts in public policy, especially in economic public policies. And with that, I would like to thank you. I believe I spoke within my time, and I am happy to answer to your questions later. Thank you very, very much, Isabel. It was very interesting to see what kind of possibilities there are and what kind of alternatives we have in Uruguay. Thank you so much for this food of thought for thought. I would like to give the floor now to Rafael Anta. He's with the Office of Competitiveness, Technology and Innovation of the Inter-American Development Bank. And I would like to share my screen with you. And I would like to thank you for organizing this seminar and for inviting me to it. My name is Rafael Anta. I am with the bid. In a short disclaimer, I'm not an economist, and I'm also no policy specialist. I'm an engineer working in this realm. And I would like to start by saying it will be very hard to say something more interesting than what we heard from Victoria and from Isabel. But you brought many reflections to me, and I would like to share now some words on my bit. I have a local perspective, and I would like to bring that near to you, and then I would like to talk about the challenges for the region. Now, I'd like to provoke you a little bit, those that are listening to us. And I took the invitation that was reached out to me on bioeconomy and the global high-tech economy. I would like to tell you that half of my professional career was dedicated to digital technologies in the private sector and in the industry. And I saw this as a film before my eyes. I worked at all possible levels of digital technology and also in the public policy realm. And what I saw was governments missing the train. Many have said, we're living in a revolution. We have to take this train. We have to hop in and use digital tools and digital abilities. And one country or the other in Latin America has reached out to them, but many haven't. In the last 4 or 5 years, almost all of the problems in Latin America have been tackled with some sort of digitalization, but bioeconomy has been outside of all of it. The question is, can bioeconomy today hop into the technological revolution? Would that be an advantage? Will we miss this train again? Bioeconomy can be characterized by many factors, but I would like to stress only 4 of them. Biomass and infrastructure at local level, regulation, which is national, R&D, which tends to be international, and biomass and its derivatives, its trade, it tends to be global. So policy responses must be able to work at all of these levels, supporting all of these areas. And something now about the region. We have 2 main pioneers in the continent, Brazil and Argentina. Those are 2 empires, so to speak, in the bioeconomy play, as we heard from Victoria. And I would not like to add anything to what Victoria said, but then we have Colombia, which is a country that has been looking deeply into bioeconomy, and it has policies and strategies with low budget, but its bioeconomy is still on their agenda. Then we have Uruguay and Costa Rica. They have started moving in that direction. They have been changing and adapting their public policies in the past years. In Uruguay is part of one pilot project to adopt measuring indicators in the realm of bioeconomy. And then we have Mexico and Ecuador, 2 countries that have been wanting and longing to develop a bioeconomy policy, and they're starting to design their strategy. And then we have Peru, which has been signalizing some interest in this, but I've searched some policy paper on bioeconomy in Peru and I haven't found it. And there are no other countries in Latin America, Chile, Paraguay, Bolivia, other countries in Latin America that haven't been devoted to this theme. So we have many countries that are more advanced in this realm and many that aren't. But what we can see is that budget for bioeconomy has been kept very low. What we have is more like a declaration of intentions than something more concrete on these countries. As we heard from Isabel, policies and R&D has, and many entrepreneurs are putting effort in bioeconomy, and we see that they have been doing something in that area. Something important that we should discuss lately is that many countries, or some countries, have had their public policies being held by the Ministry of Agriculture, and many of them have been treating this theme in the Ministry of Economy. So Mexico and Uruguay have been discussing this within the Ministry of Agriculture, and other countries have been discussing this in the realm of the Ministry of Environment. Of course, this theme of bioeconomy is interministerial. It tackles economy and environment and agriculture. But what we see as the countries that have this discussion within the Ministry of Innovation, those countries are the countries that have been pioneering also in this area. I would like to talk about 3 challenges that we have. The first one, bioprospecting. Those challenges are bottlenecks for the development of bioeconomy. We have to talk about human capital in different life science disciplines that are dedicated to investigation. In this region, one of the positive aspects is that we have talents in life sciences, not, of course, comparable to Germany and South Korea, but we have many talents. We have many researchers that have been educated in their countries, in other countries also, and they brought back ideas. Now, the budget for bioprospecting in life science, this is, of course, not sufficient for what we need. Of course, the university has a discourse that welcomes biodiversity, but the budget has not been keeping up to the needs what we need. So bioprospecting is thus very important. We have sometimes the results are not disseminated to other sectors and to other companies that could take advantage of them. And another problem is that many countries lack the institutional capacity to negotiate agreements.
And this will take us to give us some opportunities, because countries as Costa Rica, they have an agency that already has negotiated and can provide some monitoring, and they are very pragmatic. And there are other countries where they did only 50%. Whatever it is, it comes. And the companies that come from abroad, and even those internally, they say, well, with this figure as a starting point, we don't want to explore anymore what can be done here. Of those countries that cannot solve this problem, very difficulty, they will have a good bioeconomic development based on natural resources. The second challenge that could seem smaller, but also impacts the very important segment of people dedicated to bioeconomy, is the imports of biological material. Researchers working with molecules, enzymes, proteins, fibers, whatever you want, they depend on the inputs of reactive biological materials. Latin America is a continent where very few materials are produced, and the main suppliers are found in Germany, Swiss, Korea, United States, and Japan. And these imports, they are processes that are not very clear. They are very complex processes. Many agencies are involved, costs are involved, and takes time. So if you're going to compare these with those countries that have in-house, so as to speak, all these things that they can get it on the same day, sometimes in Latin America it takes weeks. And the probability will be very much different. And the last challenge that I wanted to mention has a little bit to do with what Victoria mentioned about the Valley of Death. We found many teams of researchers that they make research and that they come to proofs of concept in their labs with a metric that can be of milliliters, of milligrams, whatever they want to produce. And after this stage of lab, they have to prepare pilots and they have to demonstrate before they go to the actual world where somehow they can get license and capital for their technology and funds, right? And these researchers, they don't find the necessary infrastructure for that, and these biorefineries are very costly. If we are going to compare this with the digital industry so that we can use internet and software, we need the skills and a broadband connection and services that will be in hand. You don't need too much infrastructure. The investment in terms of capital is almost zero. When we talk about bioeconomic projects, many, not all, but many, need access to a certain infrastructure that they don't have. And this is a big bottleneck. And this brings, or this is a problem for many researchers because in their own territory, they don't have the facilities they need. So they have to move abroad to the United States or other places. We do many surveys in the bank and we watch what's going on in the world. There are public policy instruments, there are programs from the UK and the European Union, and then they solve problems that we find in this region. And here we have the icons of four main programs that we believe that are very interesting and important in these two diagrams that we can see here, the Bio-Based Europe and Pilots for You. These are two programs that have been created by the European Union to solve this big challenge of leaving your lab and going to the real world. It's a plant, that was a mill that was installed between the Netherlands and Belgium, where there are a series of biorefineries with different technologies, and any company, any researcher, any entrepreneur can lease to develop a pilot plan or for a demonstration. And after it has been demonstrated, then they can go to the real world to collect funds and move on forward. The pilot for you, it's a very interesting initiative because it uses the biorefinery available capacity in Europe so that others can lease this unused space. And like this, they do the same thing that others do on the pilot plants. And the purpose is to find new ideas or new models or approximations to the challenges that can be used or replicated or adapted for Latin America. And like this, we can move forward with bioeconomy. We talk about speed in CONICET and of missing the train. But it's a very simple way of talking about this train is to measure the budgets and the performance of policies. a budget that the countries are dedicating, and also the capacity of those countries of using this budget in the programs. When you were, for instance, were in Germany, you see the figures, they are very big figures. Even with the UK now, that's not more in the European Union, they are investing a lot in science because they are out of the European Union. And when we analyze the figures from the United States, very big as well. So the train is moving very fast and many funds are being used. If Latin America wants to move up the scale, move up on this ladder, it will have to dedicate a good amount of funds. Well, this is what I had to share with you. Thank you very much. Right, Rafael, thank you very much. Very interesting, your presentation, and also this panorama that you provided that complements the previous presentations from Victoria and Isabel. So thank you very much. And now I will turn the floor to Pablo Maclay, my colleague, who will start some provocations so that we can open for Q&A. And I also will turn the floor to you whenever you want to make any comments or answer the questions that we got in the chat. Some have some personal comments, but you can read all of this on the Q&A session in Zoom. If you want to say anything, make any comment, you can use the mic, and you can just ask for this using the chat. Now, Pablo, I turn the floor to Pablo. He collected a few of the questions that were posted. Well, let's start our discussion. Wait a few moments for some more questions in the chat. I found that it was very interesting to hear each and every one of you. This was the first time. I loved it. All the presentations were excellent. I would like to ask a question to each of the speakers, questions that came to my mind during the presentations, and then we can go to a more to a broader discussion and answer the questions of the audience. Victoria, first for you, I would like to ask you the following. In these innovation networks that you mentioned, is there a last step that you mentioned in your chart that shows the arrival to the market and the possibility of installing in the market? And this, between this game of investments, venture capital, and a bank, to what extent is there a greater flow of funds in the Brazilian economy that can help, and where do they come from? Are they coming from abroad? Are they coming from the domestic market? So this network of financing depends only on Brazilian investors or other investors from abroad, for instance. What are the participation of each group? You're muted, Victoria. I was going to thank you for the question, but I'm going to answer your question in Portuguese. Currently, Brazil has developed a very robust basis of local investors. And when I showed that screen of the TRL, there you can find startups that are moving on, but also you have mid-sized and big-sized companies with their own technological developments, their in-house developments. According to the experience that I had at SENAI as a stakeholder in this innovation system, most of the investment is local, and especially from governments together with the companies and something of some of the investors, some that come with venture capital in this process of innovation. And this was a very good point that Rafael also mentioned. I would like to congratulate both Isabel and Rafael for their excellent presentation. But this is a point of interest of the investor in hard tech, hard science. It's more difficult to innovate in hard tech. So currently, following this experience that I have, the government is the main investor, together with big companies, companies such as Braskem, Natura, Petrobras, that can provide funds for internal development and also for startups, so that startups can develop the technology that they have and become suppliers. Did you understand? Thank you very much, Victoria. Very clear. I would like then to ask another question, but perhaps we don't have time. So thank you for the meantime, and I will turn the floor to Isabel. Isabel, I would like to ask you the following. In your presentation, you mentioned that on one side we try an integration between the research institutes and the private sector, but on the other hand, there are a series of barriers, and in some cases this can be solved, others not. So my question is, what are the mechanisms, and here I mean institutional mechanisms, contextual mechanism, to allow this to happen? To what extent the regulatory framework of of intellectual property, interferes here, and how will this be present further on? Thank you, Pablo. Yes, certainly this point also appeared on the chat. The point of this linkage, it's a little bit endemic, not only in our country, but also in the region. There are productive sectors that do not demand knowledge, and it is very difficult to recognize this because there is an undervaluation of these productive processes. This is a very difficult problem because the historical policy in terms of science and technology is always together with the supply and demand of knowledge. And only for a few years, 10 years perhaps, we have seen some very specific tools to support this linkage. There are specific mechanisms. For instance, the one that is most used is agreements, right? But this an understanding of the knowledge in this role of advisory for the short term. But things are changing, and their understanding is changing, and the efforts of getting more connections are also changing with very specific tools. In the university, we have specific tools to generate these connections. So what we do, we try to direct the research agendas towards those problems that already exist. So during the meetings, we see a list of problems based on knowledge and potential demand, and we encourage the academia and the researchers to tackle on these problems, providing some guidance to the research agenda. These are tools that are still in progress, but they are very useful to model or remodel this kind of problem, this historical disconnection. There are very interesting efforts, and the point of intellectual property is still not a problem. Depends very much on the industry, but we haven't reached many problems there. Intellectual property depends on the industry. Capacities are being built recently. I heard a process that finished on an intellectual property agreement. That was a very interesting procedure. Capacities were generated because of this, but I believe that in this moment, this is not a problem.
Thank you very much. This was very interesting, very clear. I have a question for Rafael, and then we will go to the questions of our audience. Rafael, I would like to ask you, within this logic of if we should go onto the train or not, I would like to tackle the case of Argentina. I think Brazil and Argentina have similar problems. In Argentina, we have seen a multiplication of startups in life sciences in many phases. But once we talk to those startups, what we hear from them is that they have one main challenge. They want to scale up internationally. And they talk often also about the political instability that leads that many startups open their doors internationally instead of nationally. So of course we should tackle the train because there are many startups doing something. But on the other hand, I have the impression that we're missing the train because the scaling up is being doing internationally. What are the strategies within Latin American economies that are possible so that those startups settle in Latin America and are not exported to well, globally? Now, this question is very important. I spent 2 hours yesterday talking about this topic precisely. To be able to be an entrepreneur in life sciences, biology, sustainable biological resources, the way is very complex. It is very complex to follow this pathway because you have to do research, import biological components, you have to take a probe of a species, and then you have to have authorization to do that. There are many steps. Once you have this authorization, you have to gather many other probes, and then we have other challenges. In Germany, for instance, you would need many certifications so as to be able to reach out to that market. So there are many challenges within each step of the life cycle of the creation of a company in this sector. Countries are trying to tackle this. This is complex technically and scientifically. And of course, there is an entrepreneurial perspective to that. I would like to bring to you an example. We had a fashion, something that was very popular over the past years. The idea to bring companies and bring companies such as call centers to Latin America in the Indian style. And once this was brought to Latin America, there were many work permit problems, there were many legal problems. And those companies started to map those challenges and trying to tackle each one of them. The thing is, in Latin America, there is no one that has been mapping each of these concrete challenges for each entrepreneur. So what is sad is that problems are very known. There are problems that are bigger than others. Some are more important than others. But there are many problems that are just small barriers so that entrepreneurs can initiate their companies. So, for instance, Ecuador forbids genetic modification. So this type of thing has to be done somewhere else in the States, for instance. So this is one of the problems. So we have to design the life cycle of an idea, of a challenge, and design this is actually very easy, but to map the challenge and know where to do what, this is more difficult. You have to rethink the whole process to do that. And I have to say, you didn't ask for this, but I have to say, when we examine public policies on bioeconomy in the world, the United States, Japan, Germany, Korea, what we see is an ambition, a marvelous ambition of those countries. They have a focus. They want to be, for instance, the United States wants to be the champion in biological economics. Other countries want to be champions of other areas, so they know where they want to be champions of. But here we don't have this vision yet. In Latin America, we have always the same message. We have biomass, but so what? What can we do with it? Very interesting. Your comment, Rafael, thank you so much. I would not like to monopolize the discussion. I would like to give the floor to the questions that were placed in the chat box. Melisa, would you like to tackle those questions? Yes. We have a question from Natalia. And then we can move forward to the other questions. I would translate your question into Spanish because I don't speak Portuguese very well. Natalia asks to Isabel. Isabel, the concept of bioeconomy is not broadly understood as you have studied. Do you intend to develop strategies to enhance awareness on that concept, a better knowledge of this concept? And if yes, how do you plan to do this? And we have another question, a more general question to Isabel. Selena, would you like to place this question? This is a very interesting comment from Selena to Isabel. Okay, I will read it out while after Isabel answers. Thank you, Natalia, for the question. Exactly, we are in the process right now to understand the complexity of the concept and to understand the broadness of this complexity, how people understand this concept. And we have not yet thought about answer strategies. We have to give more time to understand better how this complexity has been shaped in many countries. Thank you very much, Isabel. I would like to read out, no, pardon me, I would like to give the floor to Lucia Pitaluga. Let's see if we can hear her. Yes, we do. Thank you very much. 3 presentations were very interesting. Many ideas were brought to place and can be further discussed. I have 2 questions connected to public policies. As far as Rafael Anta has said, he said in Latin America, we don't have a clear vision as to what is our identity in bioeconomy. I thought that this thought is excellent. Perhaps he tackled the core of the thing. It is very interesting to see that he is talking about Latin America being outside of Latin America so that he has this clear vision of it. What is lacking to us is that we have to know where to put our efforts into. Bioeconomy has to be tackled holistically. It is a development model. And once we have this vision, once we understand that this is a development model that has to encompass economy and society, there could be the creation of a strategy of articulation. I'm not talking about centralization of public policies. I'm talking about the possibility of planning in an articulate way so as to bring in many dimensions of bioeconomy so as to tackle the problem. As we heard from Rafael, there are many countries with many different bioeconomy strategies. As we heard also from him, bioeconomy has been tackled by many different ministries, agriculture, innovation, environment. So we don't see an articulation of those areas. This would be my first comment and question, which is, do you think that it is important to develop an articulation at the highest level, as we heard from Isabel, so that bioeconomy can be tackled from the agricultural side, from the production, consumption side, culture, so as to change the way people think? This would be my first question. My second question has also to do with public policies. How to measure bioeconomy? We have been working in Uruguay with a bioeconomy project beyond that one that you saw in the northern part of the country. The project I'm involved in has to do with forestry bioeconomy in Uruguay. And we have started working in the framework of a network. Forestry is not a vertical theme. It has to be tackled intersectorally, tackle other sectors, biodiversity, eucalyptus, cellulosis. Since those measurements and those attitudes generate other products in other areas, such as silviculture. So how do you see this? Do you see this example as a possibility of generating a network of public policy so as to be innovative, so as to change bioeconomy?
Thank you, Lucia. I have another two questions, very broad questions, and then I'll turn the floor to our speakers for their answers. Celine, you have the floor. Hello? Can you hear me? Very well. Thank you very much. All the presentations were very interesting. I come from the National University of Cordoba in Argentina, and I also work at CONICET with this subject of bioeconomy. We're doing a survey in several Argentina provinces, and I would like to mention something that you probably know, and it's about the presentation of Victoria. We in Argentina, we are developing some startups where we are doing a lot of work with the public-private agendas, the public-private investments. I saw an example, which is the following: the new SF500, which is a consortium of companies and agencies that belong to the state, especially Santa Fe, one of the provinces in Argentina, with the idea of financing. It is called SF500 because it's 500 from Santa Fe that is going to finance 500 startups in bioeconomy for the next 5 years. The other big example is Bioseries, which is an agency that is public and private, internationally recognized, and as a developing agency, and how they approach this issue. My question that goes beyond what we have here in Argentina, because there are many things. When we can travel to Santa Fe, we go there to get acquainted with these projects that are very big. Many are being negotiated at the exchange in the US. But my greatest concern in this development in bioeconomy that goes together with what Isabel mentioned is linked to social impacts that we find in this area. And not only in terms of inclusion, but I'm also thinking about agroecology, the moral work. Couldn't we include this as a biotechnological challenge for a startup? Do you have any idea how we could include these points? And also think on environmental impacts related to bioeconomy, like the use of GMOs, the seeds. Do you have any reflection about this? Thank you very much for giving me the floor and tell you that this is a very interesting webinar. Thank you, Selena, for your comments. Another comment from our audience, from María Encarnaciones, and she said that somehow we are repeating the challenges that the Latin American countries have faced historically. So question, how bioeconomy can provide a different perspective for these same challenges? Or what differential elements bioeconomy brings compared to what we had before? What could help us on this leap? I don't know, Pablo, if you would like to ask a last question, because before we turn the floor. Well, not to be too much. Let's hear first the answers, and then we come to a closure, right? Start as you wish. Isabel, Victoria. Well, thank you very much. I don't know if we can ask, but I have a question. Thank you for your comments. My question adds to Selena's, and it goes to Rafael, especially because he showed us a very interesting and international point of view. And one way of opening some room for bioeconomy is to have a strategic plan. For instance, in science and technology of innovation, we have to include bioeconomy in this arena. And this is perhaps one of the priorities that we're looking for the development of the country. So my question is, with this concern, of linking bioeconomy and sustainability, because these are keys as the Sustainable Development Strategy, we also have to include the social impact and the dynamics of social transition and environmental sustainability. So how can we do to overcome this sectorial point of view, especially in companies of innovation and technology, concerning this governance to answer to these processes, these very complex points, and that really add to this, because it's not something that you put it here and remove it over there. In Uruguay, you are in the process of restructuring the system of science, innovation, and technology, at least on theoretically, but it can be very interesting. Thank you, Isabel. Victoria. I received many questions, but I think I'll try to sum them up. First of all, what Lucia mentioned about the broad vision and the sectorial networks. Well, in Brazil, what we can say is that we still don't have a broader vision. We are trying in very specific approaches to prepare this kind of network, to develop these places where we can find stakeholders from different industries, like government, companies, to think about a better bioeconomy to Brazil. But we still have to take this to the government. We have a model, and we have a bioeconomy observatory that belongs to the Ministry of Science and Technology, but the focus is very much centered in the academia point of view. So Lambrafi and the SENAI network, these are institutions that exist to work with companies, and they are trying to bring all this importance and all these productive stakeholders, also thinking on bioeconomy. And these stakeholders, with their associations, sectorial associations, they are also moving further, and these association of bioinnovation, they and their companies, they are preparing their own trials to study a vision of technological development that can make a bit more sense to Brazil in terms of climate mitigation. I don't know if perhaps this is something that we have to solve. And with the past government, we didn't have much room for that. But I believe that now we will find progress. And in terms of the being sectorial or not, that question, I believe that having as a foundation a circular bioeconomy where we include sustainability, but secularization is also and including that concept of waste and the use of the whole biomass. It's important that the networks are multi-sectorial and solutions be also driven not only to a specific sector, so that we can have more opportunities to innovate with a synergy among different industries. And about the social point, this is a very core point in all the discussions here in Brazil, especially considering the biodiversity of the Amazon region. So in Brazil currently, we see a process of becoming or seeing a leading role of the civil society, because civil society work with traditional communities, with the Maroon people, with the indigenous people, and these groups are having greater voice now, especially because of the action of the philanthropic organizations. They're becoming very important because they're placing people in the core. We don't have solutions. We have loss of the genetic heritage, for instance, in Brazil, and that demands a certain offset because of the use of the genetic heritage of a region. And so the company has to provide a social offset because they are occupying or using that genetic heritage. But we have to think also how we can have something more systemic, organic, and coordinated. Thank you very much. So thank you, Victoria. So, Rafael, the questions are very good and so complex. I'm going to try to answer what Lucia, Isabel mentioned, and you will see that my answers also include a few points mentioned already by Victoria. I would like to start by saying that to be responsible in a country that wants to implement a bioeconomy policy is not easy, it's not simple. It's one of the most complex policies because the person in charge have a big dilemma. Well, it has to meet the social demands, has to meet the demands from the companies, and also include sustainability, and somehow fit all these three parts is not easy. You can include sustainability of the company or company and society, but if you don't connect all the three of them, then we won't see the policy moving further. and having enough guarantees. The policymaker is very interested in the social aspects and to create this bioeconomy policy similar to the United States here in Latin American countries would be an excluding policy, because if we talk about bioeconomy and synthetic bioeconomy, we would be leaving aside millions of producers that produce, for instance, nuts. So our policymakers cannot start with a proposal that I would call only high tech. But Argentina and Brazil, they are big stakeholders. They can be high tech and they can compete with the United States and with Europe. And here we see a big contrast of very different extremes. The Brazil and Argentina, they have the technological border, but they have the other extreme of the non-border. So my answer had three parts. This is the first part. In second place, I would like to explore the option of what a policy of bioeconomy with higher tech and low tech brings. Low tech actions can include the small farmers, including them on a value chain where they contribute with some things, even if it's not very much sophisticated. They make the collection of waste and then they can use them in a mill. Only this fact of including them can bring them an additional income for their traditional activity, and they can recognize how valuable it is to make this. The third part of my answer has to do with Isabella, that model that mentioned governance, and governance has to supply or has to give us solutions. Power for Bio is a program from the European Union launched 4 years ago to design the strategies in bioeconomy that are linked to subnational levels. And this program has helped 10 different regions in Europe. In Spain, for instance, in Andalusia, in Austria, and other countries in Northern Europe. And after this was done, the experience that came from it helped it to launch 10 sub-national strategies. And there was a situation where for some territories, this was a second strategy because they had already been working on this for years, but for other territories, this was their first choice. So there were territories with more experience, others with less, and this generated a very interesting dynamics. Another interesting point of this experience, all of this is documented, of course, is that they started with a task force that in a subnational level, and they placed the public sector, the private sector, and civil society, and in the public sector, the governments, energy, transportation, water, sanitation, and innovation. The first task of this group was to define what was their understanding of bioeconomy. If this task is performed in a connection, we will have a definition including all the aspirations of the territory and not just a copy of what another country around the world has done. The second task of this group is to design their own strategy. What we have, what are our capacities, what are the resources, where are we heading to? And then a plan will be developed to implement this strategy and to monitor it. All of this is documented in a methodology that has been translated into Spanish and Portuguese. It is a methodology that helps to guide this conversation. What do we want to do? Perhaps in Brazil, perhaps we can have as many strategies as many states that we find in that country. Whatever is created in the Northeast is totally different of what is in São Paulo.
Thank you very much. We now have further 5 minutes for another round of questions, and I will give the floor to 2 people, Pablo and the further one. Please be brief in your statements. And Juan Pedro. Juan Pedro, you will be able to say something, and then Miguel. I would like to ask you to be very brief in your comments. Miguel. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for your presentations. They were all very interesting and inspiring. I had 3 comments that were tackled in your presentations and also in the questions. One has to do to what Lucia said before, but also something that we heard from Rafael and Isabel. The theme of the public policy design. The development of articulated strategies with other levels of governance and other sectors, more traditional sectors, suggest the need to have a starting point. Since this is one dimension of the whole, but we have another dimension of it. We have to have an horizontal expansion and a vertical expansion, reach out to territories, microregions, states, so that the needs are identified. I think that the challenge is to try to combine the idea of reaching out to territories to a variable geometry so that specificities of the regions can be tackled. This becomes very clear, or became very clear, in the presentation of Uruguay and Brazil. What we see is a heterogeneity that is very apparent, but we see also diversity and asymmetry above all between different capacities in the realm of technology, science, and infrastructure. In the case of Argentina, Argentina is very strong in technology, but is more focused in science. Technology, in 80% of the cases, is there, right near to Buenos Aires, Cordoba, and Santa Fe, but not in the other places. This is a challenge. In terms of sustainable production, the economy involves having more innovation, articulation of value chains locally, but also to develop a new conception for public policies. My last point is that it is true that if we would like to go into the train, we need support and investments. But we have to do a diagnosis of the opportunities and where should we put the resources into. We have to focus on bioeconomy and development, but at the same time, these resources are not never-ending. They're finite. So under this perspective, it is important to have a diagnosis of opportunities and capacities at territorial level. This is important, not only to enhance availability of resources, but also to allocate them properly. Thank you, Miguel, for your intervention. Juan Pedro, if you have a very brief comment or question, you may now pose it. It isn't actually a question. It has to do with what was said before. It came to me very clearly that specificities have to be tackled. I had the opportunity once to talk to Isabel, and at that point, I talked to her about a book that I recommend that tackles Uruguay and the physiocracy in the territory of Uruguay. The concept is very broad. You have to anchor this concept somewhere. Territories are key to do that, to raise awareness, to reach out to the territories in Uruguay so that we can focus specifically on this theme. A second thing, what Rafael said, and I would like to stress, is that there are tensions in public policies. We see in Uruguay an attempt to implement policies to better um, cultures and agricultural crops. It is a country that depends much more on international investment than Brazil and Argentina. So public policies have to be aligned so that Uruguay keeps up being attractive. So we have to invest in intersectoral public policies, in state policies instead of ministerial policies to tackle bioeconomy. And I would like to stress this and stress the importance of the territory so that small countries such as Paraguay, in Uruguay, you know, they're very dependent from bigger economies such as Brazil and Argentina. In those places, policies have to be tackled that way. Juan Pedro, thank you very much for your intervention. Do we have another intervention or another thought that needs to be brought up? Yes, I would like to talk in 30 seconds, speak in 30 seconds about the limit of sustainability. I would like to share something. I don't know if there is someone here from Colombia. In Colombia, there is a fantastic institute that prospects very well, and they have important actions. They research species and they can classify them in species under menace or not, according to the biodiversity in the region and knowledge on climate problems. Of course, they do this kind of research on and many different species, nuts, flowers. The question is, how can we use and research species without disturbing the ecosystem? The question that they pose is that to what sector are the research that we're doing important? And they connect to, for instance, some industry, for instance, in the cosmetic industry, and they produce research connected to this industry. And what they do is they have always in front of their minds that research on species is done according to the limits that nature is posing. So this is an extraordinary example coming from Colombia. Thank you very much, Rafael, Victoria. Thank you very much for your intervention and for your presentations. They were all very interesting. The discussion was also very interesting. Many areas and fields were discussed, processes of innovation. I know we could keep on talking for many hours, but we don't have much time for this right now. You're all in contact and you can reach out to all participants. in a timely manner if you have questions. I would like to give the floor to Jorge Celari. He is a researcher from SABio at the University of Bonn.
It's even hard to try to summarize everything in 2 minutes, right? But I think that it became very clear to us all here that, of course, our region, Latin America, has a lot of potential to be in the forefront of the bioeconomy. I think no one here would challenge that, but it also became very clear that we do have lots of challenges to make this vision happen. And vision is actually a word that was repeated a couple of times here, right? That maybe a clear vision is something that's indeed still missing, both at the country level, but also at the regional level, right? And especially when we talk about this different levels, I think the issue of coordination also became clear here as one of the big challenges, right? Coordination, not only between different sectors in any one given country, but also coordination between the countries, right? So we can build synergies. And there was also another point that I think it was you, Rafael, who mentioned that when we talk about bioeconomy, there are so many different aspects and each of them are at a different level, right? You have like biomass trade, that is a global issue, but biomass production is an issue at the national scale. Then you have R&D that often becomes more of a regional thing. And I think these different levels also highlight the need for us to think about policies at these different levels, right? If we really want to address these challenges that prevent us to benefit from these biotechnological innovations, we do have to think about public policies at these different levels. And again, to the extent possible, coordinated policies between these different actors. So, well, just want to thank everyone involved here in this webinar, and of course, a very special thanks to our three speakers, Victoria, Rafael, and Isabel. That was really great presentations, great discussions. And of course, also thank you to all the attendees. Well, we did record this webinar, so we will put the recording on our project website. Actually, if someone from the team can just put the link to our website in the chat. And well, I think you also all have our contacts. So of course, it will be a pleasure to keep this discussion going, and hopefully we can find some opportunities to keep collaborating in these issues. So thank you very much, everyone.
Muchísimas gracias. Y también les queremos recordar que
Thank you very much. And I would like to say that we will start a series of projects, and I would like to reach out an invitation in a timely manner to you to other activities that we will launch in the near future. So thank you very much.
Breve. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.